In the middle of the 8th century, on the vast steppes of Central Asia, two of the greatest empires the world had ever seen stood face to face. From the east marched a disciplined army of 30,000, carrying the pride of a civilization centuries old. From the west came a host nearly 7 times larger, a tide of warriors driven by faith and conquest. The clash shook the earth. Arrows blackened the sky, steel rang out across the plains, and alliances forged in gold shattered in an instant. Betrayal struck like a dagger in the dark, turning hope into horror and order into chaos. What began as a struggle for the Silk Road became a storm of blood and dust, a battle where the fate of continents trembled on the edge of a sword, and from its ashes emerged something no army had foreseen, a secret carried not in weapons, but in knowledge. A gift that would outlast empires, travel across continents, and forever change the story of mankind. In the middle of the 8th century, Asia stood at a crossroads. Two of the greatest powers of the age were reaching for the same prize: control over Central Asia, the beating heart of the Silk Road. To the east, the Tang Dynasty of China, proud of its ancient legacy and unmatched cultural splendor. To the west, the Abbasid Caliphate, heirs of Islam's first great expansion, a new empire burning with ambition. Their collision at the river Talas in the year 751 would decide who held the gateway between east and west. The causes of the conflict were as old as empires themselves: power, wealth, and the fear of losing both. The Tang court in Chang'an sought to extend Chinese influence across the fertile Fergana Valley, securing trade routes and vassal states. The Abbasids, rising after toppling the Umayyads, were eager to project strength and push their dominion eastward. Each side knew that Central Asia was more than a map of mountains and deserts. It was the lifeline of silk, spices, and silver, the arteries of civilization. Yet the two armies that gathered on opposite sides of the Talas River could not have been more different. The Tang brought perhaps 30,000 soldiers under the command of General Gao Xianzhi, a brilliant but ruthless strategist of Goguryeo descent. His forces were disciplined, professional, and backed by the prestige of centuries of Chinese statecraft. Tang soldiers carried composite bows, spears, and the famed straight-edged Dao swords, their armor a mixture of lamellar plates and leather designed for both mobility and endurance. They were supported by Central Asian allies, including contingents of Turkic horsemen. The Abbasid army, by contrast, numbered around 200,000 men under the command of Ziyad ibn Salih, a trusted general of the Caliph. This staggering numerical advantage gave the Caliphate confidence, but numbers alone did not guarantee victory. The Abbasids were a patchwork of peoples, Arabs, Persians, and Turkic tribes, united under the banner of Islam. Their strength lay in their cavalry, light and swift, capable of launching devastating charges and harassing their foes with clouds of arrows. Many wielded curved sabers and lances, weapons ideal for the steppe's open plains. Each side had its vulnerabilities. The Tang, though disciplined, were far from home. Their supply lines stretched thin across deserts and mountains. Their Central Asian allies, especially the Karluks, were restless and unreliable. The Abbasids, while numerous, had only recently consolidated power after a bloody revolution against the Umayyads. Internal rivalries still simmered beneath the surface. It was a contest not merely of armies, but of leaders. Gao Xianzhi was cunning, a man who had crushed rebellions and subdued kingdoms for the Tang throne. Ziyad ibn Salih, though less celebrated, was patient and calculating, determined to outlast and overwhelm his foe. Both understood that Talas would not be a border skirmish. It would be a reckoning. As the dust of Central Asia settled before the coming clash, two worlds prepared to decide the fate of the Silk Road. On one side stood the heirs of Confucius in the Middle Kingdom. On the other, the warriors of the Quran and the Caliphate. The stage was set for a battle that would echo across continents. The summer sun burned over the steppes of Central Asia as the two armies faced each other across the Talas River. Dust rose with every hoofbeat, banners rippled in the dry wind, and the silence before the storm pressed upon both sides like a weight from the heavens. Soldiers sharpened blades, tightened armor, whispered prayers, each man knowing that the clash ahead might decide not only his life, but the destiny of empires. General Gao Xianji positioned his Tang forces with surgical precision. His infantry formed solid ranks near the riverbank, shields locked, spears thrust forward, a wall of discipline honed by decades of Chinese military tradition. Behind them, archers strung their composite bows, ready to unleash storms of arrows. On the flanks, he placed his Turkic allies, horsemen skilled in fast charges and sudden retreats. Gao knew he could not match the Abbasids in sheer numbers, but he believed he could outmaneuver them, cutting into their vast host like a blade through silk. Across the river, General Ziyad ibn Salih arrayed the Abbasid army like an ocean of men. Tens of thousands of cavalry stretched across the plain, restless mounts stamping the earth. Behind them, infantry of Arabs and Persians braced with curved swords and lances, while standards bearing Quranic verses fluttered high in the desert wind. Ziyad's strategy was simple but deadly. Overwhelm the Tang with relentless pressure, stretch their lines, and crush them with cavalry charges that no disciplined wall could withstand forever. The first day began with a thunder of hooves. Abbasid horsemen surged forward, arrows whistling through the air, blackening the sky. The Tang lines braced, shields rattling as the first volley struck. Gao Xianji gave the order, and his archers answered with precision. Tang arrows, lighter and faster, cut down riders at a distance, and for a moment the Abbasid charge faltered. The battlefield erupted in chaos. War cries in Chinese and Arabic, the clash of steel on shields, the neighing of horses pierced by shafts. But Gao had not come this far to simply hold. With a signal, his Turkic cavalry swept out from the flanks, wheeling like hawks. They struck the Abbasid sides with sudden fury, loosing arrows and driving their spears into exposed riders. Dust rose in choking clouds, and for a time it seemed as if the smaller Tang army might carve its way through the greater horde. Yet Ziyad was no fool. He pulled back his vanguard, refusing to be baited into reckless pursuit. His men reformed, steady and disciplined, while wave after wave of cavalry circled to wear down the Tang lines. The sun dipped low, painting the battlefield red, but neither side broke. Night fell over a plain littered with broken lances, blood-soaked armor, and the cries of the dying. The first clash at Talas had ended without decision, but both commanders knew this was only the beginning. The Abbasids still held the advantage of numbers, while the Tang relied on precision and discipline. What neither side could yet see was that the fate of the battle would not be decided by steel or numbers alone, but by betrayal. The battle did not end with the setting sun. For 5 days, Tang and Abbasid soldiers clashed again and again, the plain of Talas echoing with the fury of war. What began as careful maneuvers soon devolved into relentless bloodshed, each side struggling to break the other in a storm of steel and dust. At dawn, Abbasid cavalry charged once more, their horses pounding the earth like thunder. Spears leveled, sabers flashing, they crashed against the Tang lines in waves. The impact sent men and horses tumbling, shields splintering under the sheer weight of the assault. Gao Xianji's infantry braced, driving their spears into the chests of onrushing riders, while archers poured arrows into the chaos. The air grew thick with screams, the metallic scent of blood, and the clash of iron. The Tang counterattacked with precision. Their disciplined ranks surged forward, swords hacking, shields smashing, cutting down Abbasid soldiers in brutal close combat. Dust clouds swallowed men whole, where no one could see friend or foe until the blade struck. Horses screamed as arrows pierced their flanks, throwing riders into the melee, where Tang swords rose and fell in a rhythm of death. On the flanks, Turkic allies of the Tang darted in and out, loosing arrows while evading the Abbasid charges. They harassed the enemy with lightning strikes, chasing scattered riders, only to vanish before the counterblow. Yet the Abbasids pressed on, their endless numbers driving the Tang back step by step. By the third day, the battlefield was a nightmare. Corpses littered the ground, armor glinting in the sun, rivers of blood soaking the sand. Men fought until exhaustion consumed them, until shields grew too heavy to lift, until swords stuck to their hands with dried gore. Neither side could claim victory, but both refused to yield. Each night, the moans of the dying carried across the camps. Soldiers whispered of omens in the sky, of stars burning red as if heaven itself watched. Gao Xianji walked among his men, urging them to hold, promising that discipline would outlast the enemy's numbers. Ziyad ibn Salih, calm and calculating, told his troops the Tang were trapped, their doom only a matter of time. And so the struggle dragged on, every clash more savage than the last. Men were cut down in desperate charges, hunted across the plain, trampled beneath hooves, or skewered on lances. The plain of Talas was becoming a graveyard, but neither Gao nor Ziyad would retreat. The fate of Central Asia demanded nothing less than total victory. By the fifth day, exhaustion gripped both armies, yet neither Gao Xianji nor Ziyad ibn Salih showed signs of retreat. The battlefield at Talas had become a furnace where men were consumed like kindling. But beneath the clash of steel and the cries of the dying, a secret current stirred, one that would decide the fate of the war. Among Gao's forces fought the Karluks, a powerful Turkic tribe allied to the Tang. They had been restless for days, their loyalty bought with promises and gold. Yet their chieftains had long resented Chinese rule and watched the battle with cold calculation. Now, with both sides bloodied and weary, the Karluks chose their moment. At midday, as Tang infantry braced against another Abbasid cavalry surge, the Karluks turned. With a sudden, deafening roar, they wheeled their horses and struck, not at the Abbasids, but at the Tang rear. Gao's men reeled in shock as their supposed allies drove spears into their backs, loosing arrows into the crowded ranks. Confusion tore through the Tang lines, discipline shattering like glass under the hammer of betrayal. Ziyad seized the moment. With a command, Abbasid cavalry thundered forward, this time with renewed fury. They crashed into the front while Karluks savaged the rear, and the Tang army found itself crushed between two relentless forces. The plain erupted into chaos, men screaming, banners toppling, formations collapsing as panic spread. Gao Xianji fought desperately to hold order. He rode along the lines, shouting commands, rallying pockets of soldiers to form shield walls. His personal guard hacked a path through the melee, cutting down foes with grim determination. But the tide was unstoppable. Where once the Tang had stood firm, now they were surrounded, squeezed from all sides by horsemen who showed no mercy. The Abbasid cavalry cut through the Tang flanks like scythes through wheat. Riders pursued fleeing soldiers, cutting them down in a frenzy of sabers and lances. Horses trampled the wounded, screams drowned in the roar of battle. The air was thick with dust and blood, the ground slick beneath the boots of desperate men. For Gao, the realization came like a blade to the heart. His army was no longer fighting for victory, it was fighting to survive. What had begun as a contest of empires had turned into a slaughter. The Tang banners, once bright against the sky, now lay torn in the dust of Talas. The slaughter at Talas reached its breaking point. The Tang lines, once proud and unyielding, buckled under the twin assault of Abbasid cavalry and Karluk betrayal. What had been an army was now a desperate mass of men fighting in fragments, each pocket surrounded, each soldier clinging to life in a tide of hopeless fury. General Gao Xianji refused to abandon the field. He rode among the chaos, his voice hoarse from shouting, urging his men to stand, to fight, to carve a path through the tightening noose. His guards fought with grim resolve, cutting down enemies as they shielded their commander. But even Gao could not reverse the tide. Wave after wave of Abbasid horsemen crashed upon them, driving the Tang deeper into ruin. The Karluks showed no mercy. Former allies struck with savage glee, hunting down fleeing Tang soldiers, loosing arrows into their backs as they tried to escape. The betrayal was absolute, and it shattered what remained of Tang morale. Panic turned into rout. Men dropped shields, abandoned formations, and fled across the plain, only to be cut down by lances or trampled beneath hooves. Reports tell us that nearly two-thirds of Gao's army was annihilated. Tens of thousands lay dead or dying, their bodies carpeting the battlefield beneath the merciless Central Asian sun. Those who survived often did so only to be captured, dragged away in chains to foreign lands. Gao himself managed to escape with a fraction of his force, retreating eastward through mountains and deserts, carrying with him the bitter knowledge of defeat. For the Tang Dynasty, the loss was catastrophic. Never again would China project its power so far into Central Asia. The dream of dominance over the Silk Road had died at Talas. On the Abbasid side, the victory was total. Ziyad ibn Salih stood over the plain of the fallen, his banner flying above a field of silence, broken only by the moans of the wounded. The Caliph's dominion had triumphed, and Central Asia would now tilt toward the west. But Talas was more than victory or defeat. In the ashes of battle lay prisoners, among them Chinese artisans, skilled men whose knowledge would change the world. From their hands, the art of papermaking would pass westward, first to Samarkand, then to Baghdad, and eventually to Europe. What had begun in blood would echo in ink, reshaping civilization itself. The dust of Talas slowly settled, but its echoes would thunder across centuries. For the Tang Dynasty, the defeat was more than the loss of an army. It was the end of an age of outward expansion. China turned inward, its ambitions in Central Asia broken. Though the Tang would continue to flourish culturally, the empire's western frontier never recovered the influence it once held. The dream of commanding the Silk Road had slipped forever from their grasp. For the Abbasids, Talas was a triumph that secured their dominance in Central Asia. The Caliphate now stood as the undisputed power of the Islamic world, with its banners carried across Persia, Mesopotamia, and into the heart of the steppes. The victory marked the high tide of Islamic expansion eastward, drawing the frontier of civilizations with fire and steel. Yet the greatest legacy of Talas was not written in blood, but in ink. Among the prisoners taken were Chinese artisans, skilled in the craft of papermaking, a knowledge that had been guarded for centuries. In Samarkand, these artisans revealed their secrets. From there, the Abbasids carried papermaking to Baghdad, where it flourished in the great libraries of the Islamic Golden Age. Books multiplied, scholarship expanded, and knowledge began to circulate on a scale the world had never seen. Centuries later, that same technology would reach Europe. The paper born of Chinese ingenuity and carried westward through conquest would fuel the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the scientific revolution. The battle that began as a clash for control of the Silk Road became the spark for a revolution in human thought. Talas, then, was not merely a war between East and West. It was a turning point in the history of civilization. On that sun-scorched plain in Central Asia, empires rose and fell, blood was spilled and banners torn, but something endured. A thread of knowledge carried from captives to conquerors reshaped the destiny of humanity. And so, the Battle of Talas remains a reminder. Empires may fight for power and territory, but the true legacy of history often lies in what survives the battlefield. The ideas, the inventions, the silent gifts carried forward by fate.